this computer. There we go. And I've got some legalese here on our agenda that I'll read first, and then we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance. So pursuant to the governor's stay-at-home, stay-safe order, the city will take actions necessary and routine for business items. The city is prohibited from conducting meetings unless this meeting is not conducted in person. Instead, it provides options for the public to attend through telephone access, internet, or other means of remote access. Also provides the ability for persons attending the meeting not in person to hear each other at the same time. Therefore, we have a Zoom meeting here this evening. So I don't see anybody else that needs to be let in. So I'm going to proceed with our meeting here and ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. So pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A little bit of delay there, but all right. Our first order of business tonight is the continuity of operations, or COOP, plan. And we talked about this quite a bit at last council meeting, and the chief did some work on it, and we did some more work on it, and our redliner version went out to you today. So with that, I think I've kind of covered it. Does anybody have any concerns or corrections of what was sent out to you today? There were 3 red lines. Councilmember Ashby reads things in detail, and she got us, we weren't consistent in 3 different places, and I think we caught those 3 spots. I think there might have been one other question that may not have been addressed in the change. Councilor Ashby, did you have any other questions or concerns in what you brought forward? You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, I didn't, and I don't, I've just wondered when we were talking about relocating the departments and doing things, if we wanted to make any note of working virtually. And I don't know that it's important. I know there are areas in there where we talk about what computer equipment we need, what communications equipment we need. And that was my only comment, is, you know, just curious that we hadn't mentioned anything about working remotely.
We certainly can if you would prefer, but I think we have plenty of flexibility in the plan as it stands right now. It basically says, you know, ideally, you know, for example, with the city council, it says ideally we would like to have the city council try and be co-located with the mayor, but it provides flexibility already for us to be doing what we're doing now with the telecommuting and the Zoom calls.
And our other policies that we just recently enacted just ahead of COVID allow us to do exactly what we're doing here tonight. And then on top of that, then the governor's got an order that's about the OPMA that Charlie, does that continue after this, or is after the governor's order, then does we go back to the normal Open Public Meeting Act rules, correct?
Correct. Technically, the proclamation specific to the OPMA expires on the 23rd, so just a couple days from now. But most attorneys are advising that the governor is going to make that concurrent with the stay-home order, because the philosophy behind it is we can't have a public meeting and facilitate a violation of the stay-home order. So it will likely run through May 4th at the earliest that we'll get relief from the OPMA proclamation.
Okay.
And I would just comment that I appreciate the department heads and the chief and the mayor tolerating my question last week about reviewing it and making sure that they all recommended it be brought forward in the form it was. So I appreciate that very much, because we didn't, as a council, really have an opportunity to do our due diligence, and we really relied on our department heads for that. Thank you.
It's no problem at all. So, and that's why you guys, instead of having 1 item on the agenda, have 5 items on the agenda, because we're trying to comply with our standard process, and the things you're going to see next week on the agenda, you're going to get to chat about a little bit tonight and voice any concerns you have. So if there aren't any other questions about the COOP plan, then we will, Cindy, you've got one? Go ahead.
Very minor. I'm just wondering if it's the right thing on pages 17 and 35. Under critical steps, it says manager. Should that say mayor, or is it intentionally saying manager?
Okay, what's 17? Where are you seeing?
The
I think-
second column, provide direction to the mayors in the first column. Should that just be manager because we're not sure who's going to actually be managing, or should that actually say mayor?
That's for city executive down. So there's city council. I think this is generic, so that
Okay. I was just wondering.
we don't have a city administrator though
Right.
currently.
So should it say mayor? I just.
Are you talking where it says city council provide direction to the mayor?
No, the next box down, city executive, number 2.
Okay. Administer and direct all city personnel, manage overall city operations, and inform elected officials.
It's not.
Well,
I guess it's not speaking to city. It's a city executive, which could be the mayor.
Well,
It's
actually,
there-
Robin, the first one under critical steps next to city council, it does say manager, and it also says on 35. And I just didn't know if it, in our case, it should say mayor. But
Yes, that's probably just another one that we missed.
Okay,
Again,
so there's
I
a-
appreciate everybody reading in detail. Sometimes when you have these large projects, you can have 10 people read through and they miss little things. So I can change that for sure.
Okay, so,
So-
it's in the critical steps. I see this now. Yeah, number 1, it says manager
Mhm.
to the mayor.
And-
Mayor instead of manager, it should say mayor. As
Yeah.
needed. And then does that carry to another page? You say
Page 35, Rob?
Page
Yep.
35. Okay,
Got it?
you got it too.
Yep.
You already got it. Okay,
Yep.
mayor. Okay, as long as the chief's got it. Okay,
Okay.
so we'll catch those 2
Just-
more.
Little.
Yep.
Thanks.
Those 2. All right. Anything else? And thank you for raising your hand. That helps me make sure I catch to call on you. All right. With that, we'll move on to number 2, which is the affordable housing contract. We got a little bit of money last month. We're ready to put that to work. And NOAA has been working with Kitsap Community Resources on our, is it 1406, House Bill 1406 dollars. And Noah, do you want to speak to this item?
Yeah, I think the mayor already summed it up pretty good. We've been working with the council and Kitsap County Resources to develop this contract draft. So we want to present this to council before having the mayor sign, ideally next week. Of important note, I guess I would focus on pages 2 of the 8-page contract. In that section, A and B is where we discuss KRC's duties and responsibilities, as well as the city's duties and responsibilities. So this was the primary area of concern for me, as we want to make sure we laid out a clear process for administering the program and providing the funds for KCR to administer their program. So we ran this pretty well, and I think we're ready to execute on the contract, provided the council doesn't have any other disagreements with how we've laid this out.
Okay. Okay, yeah, see you, Mark. Mark's taken off on us. He doesn't have anything else on the agenda. You're free to go too, Chief, if you'd like to. Okay, have a good evening.
Mayor, so this is terminating this particular agreement at the end of 2020, it looks like. We're not going beyond that. We'll take action if we want to go beyond this.
We remember we talked about 2 different programs, and we thought we would try this approach for year 1. So we've got a 1-year agreement. We could love this and everything about this, and then revisit it and extend. So what are the provisions in this, Noah? They escape me on renewal or extending this.
There's a 1-year extension option in addition to the first year.
Okay. But we did say, 4 or 5 months ago when we picked this route that we wanted to review this after the first year and see how it went. So I would say at the end of this calendar year, we'll have KCR come and tell us the successes and how successful the program was. And if we love it, then we'll renew it. And if we don't, then we'll look for a new partner.
Yep, no, I just was clarifying the intent, just make sure it was right.
Okay, other questions? Fred, yes.
I was just concerned on page 2 where it says in A, it says Port Orchard, and I thought, well, do they mean Port Orchard area, Port Orchard City? And do we want them to say Port Orchard City or not? Then I looked later at Exhibit A, and Exhibit A is kind of clear that they have to both live in the city and the housing has to be in the city. I think the only concern I would have would to make sure that all the recipients are city residents.
Yeah, and it clearly states that on page 2 there, A, housing located with the city of Port Orchard.
Okay.
So I think that is our intent, and I think the agreement speaks to that. Other questions? Yes, Jay.
I'm not sure that I've heard it before, but on the definition, under statement of work, the last bullet,
What page?
I'm sorry, page 80. So, statement of work, Exhibit A.
I'm still scrolling.
Okay, take your time.
There we go, exhibit of work. Okay, what's your question?
Last bullet, use the HUD definition of homelessness, living Ion Street.
Yeah, we've got a typo there.
That's all.
Mhm.
I didn't know if it was a way they actually put it. Minor.
There's
Thanks.
special streets, Ion streets.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? For Beck, yes.
There we
You
go.
done-
I don't have
there
a
you go.
question, but I think that statement of work clarifies Fred's answer quite clearly.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think there's several places in the document we refer specifically to the city of Port Orchard residents and boundaries. So I think we are covered, and I think KCR fully understands that.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, are there? Seen any hands raised? Okay, you guys will see this on the agenda next week also. That is our plan. I think everything's ready to roll on this one. So we're going to move on to our next item here, which is the utility waiver penalties. I with the emergency order and you ratified the shutoffs, then the governor has since issued an order related to the fees and penalties related to water utilities, but it's silent to sewer utilities. We have one bill for all of that, so kind of puts us in a funny place. So Noah and Charlie and Rebecca have been doing a body of work, and I'll let him speak to that now, where we're going to be able to address hopefully this situation, future situations, and clean up some provisions that we've currently got. So Noah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the mayor summed it up very well. We started drafting this language
John.
to waive penalties under a declared emergency. And then this week, we got some more information on the governor's new proclamation ordering all penalties to be and late fees to be waived for water utilities dating back to March 23rd. So with some clarity from legal counsel, we're going to have to credit some utility accounts that were penalized during that period of time. Again, it's not a significant dollar amount, but we will want to make sure that we're complying with the governor's new proclamation. And under this order, as the mayor identified, that he, whether intentionally or not, but focused primarily on water utilities and suspending issues future penalties until it's lifted. So we're anticipating a couple issues on our administrative side that we just want to make sure, circle back with the council on the policy direction that we're taking this. First, we believe that the council would want us to extend this waiver of late fees and penalties to all our utility customers, which would include our sewer customers as well as storm, in support of the intent of the governor's order. So I kind of want to pause there to ensure that council has an opportunity to think about that, and if they have any comments on that specific piece. Again, the governor's order doesn't specifically state that, but we would bring back a policy document, some legislation that would apply to those customers as well.
And just to add to that, so the proclamation has two sections. One is mandatory and one is optional, but strongly recommended. And the mandatory relates to water as a utility, and the strongly recommended relates to all utilities. So a number of agencies in the state have interpreted that and applied the mandatory language to all of the services that they provide, but not all have done that. So what NOAA is proposing is applying the mandatory language, which is the waiver of the fees during this period for all of your customers and all of your services.
Okay.
Did
John?
anyone just,
Oh, go ahead, Cindy, go ahead, and then I'll get Colin John.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but did anyone just have their screen go blank
Yeah,
and then?
it was Brandy had unintentionally shared her screen. So
Oh, okay,
not the first one
Thank
to do
you.
that tonight, but we're working. This is all new to us.
yeah, well, same here. Okay.
Okay,
So
John,
Matt-
did you have a question?
No, man.
No, I didn't. I was just plugging in my iPad. The battery was getting low, so sorry.
That's okay. You were it was frantic.
Well, that and I come up with a solution to printing. I pull the agenda up on my phone so I can watch it
Oh,
and
There
this.
you go. Okay.
So right now, I'm not hearing any objections to that policy direction to apply to all utilities. And again, I think we want to bring that back into our code and policy to give us that authority for future declared emergencies if one should arise. Also, during this time, as we were kind of noodling on the language, we were running into some of the issues with our existing language. And so we were thinking about modifications to the existing language that allow us to execute them better. For example, when we look at our existing language, we have an A, B, C provision in there to apply for a waiver. And under A is you have to have an active account for 12 months. What we've found is that from time to time we have a new account, a new customer coming into the city. Perhaps they didn't get their bill because it was sent to the wrong address. And under that current criteria, they are not eligible for a waiver. And so when I challenge staff, we almost see this as not necessarily the best customer service welcoming our new utility customers into the city, that, you know, if they miss their first bill, there's no way we can help them. They have to be active for 12 months. So we kind of see that provision as hindering some good customer service with our new utility customers. So there's a couple different issues we've run into over the year since we adopted this policy in January of last year, that we would like to bring to council and propose that we think would help us to operate better and also support the intent that council directed us in the prior year. So we proposed to develop some policy documents to identify, again, the parameters of waivers being discussed. And the other issue I think I laid out in hopefully the executive summary is what we're anticipating is while the governor's order directs entities to waive penalties and late fees, we are anticipating there to be some challenges with folks if they do not, or if they're not able to make their payments during this period of time. Their bill will continue to accrue to get larger, even though we're waiving the penalties and fees. And at some point, the bill may be too large to pay all at once the declared emergency is lifted. So we would come back and seek some additional language to put some deferred payment plans in place, which would allow us to suspend future penalties and allow us to work with the customer on these payment arrangements. And again, what we've seen from other entities, other cities are also looking at similar policies and are discussing this as of today and having these same policy conversations. So we have a few different items we'd like to bring back to the council for consideration to adopt.
My question, when I read what you sent out today and read this, what do we have in place as we work with our clients so that we're not discriminatory? I mean, do we have a certain set of criteria in order for them to get the waiver? I'm not talking about the ones because of the emergency. I'm talking about the ongoing ones and our previous action we've taken. I just want to make sure that we don't discriminate when we give these waivers.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Charlie and I did talk about that today, that any modifications to, I would say our current language does not allow us to discriminate because it's very clear whether you qualify or don't qualify for the exemption, and it is only based on whether you have an active account or whether you've been delinquent for the last 12 months. It's very cut and dry. These are the two criteria. So as we talk about changing the language and the criteria to give us a slightly more flexibility to work with customers that have come to us in certain circumstances that we think should qualify, but just don't because of how the language is structured, we're trying to be very careful that we don't get ourselves into that issue. So we are very mindful of that.
So Sean, do you have a question?
Yeah, just from a process standpoint, Noah, is your accounting system, is it flexible enough to allow you for that deferred billing and tracking all of that? Does that create headaches for you?
Well, it does have payment arrangement capabilities. Again, we don't typically do payment arrangements with customers. We don't have strong, I would say strong language to allow for that. We have some gray, which we've tried to be customer friendly to work with. Again, I see this as an opportunity to come back to council and really clarify intent and get some better language in our code. But the software product does have the ability to do it. But again, I think we would put some parameters around how long that is. Again, we're not a financier. We're not going to be financing people's utility bills here. This is meant to be those cases where, they haven't paid their storm bill for a number of years and all of a sudden they want to come pay it and it's $2,000 or $3,000 and they can't write that check. So can we work with that customer to get them to make some reasonable payments over the next year and kind of stop some of their bleeding? The other scenario that Charlie and I talked about is looking at the water leak language, in that if a customer's pipe burst and say they were gone on vacation for a month and their water was just running, they're going to have a very high bill. And right now they would come back and say, yes, I owe that money, but I can't cut you a check for $1,500 here today. Can I work with you? And without the language to do these payment arrangements and defer payments, we would say, well, you got to start making payments, but you're going to be penalized. So again, I don't think that's the intent of the penalty. We're not trying to continue to add an unfair burden on customers. Penalties are meant to incentivize timely payments. And there are circumstances where a payment arrangement would make sense, but it's not for our regular customers.
No, it makes perfect sense. I was just curious if your system can track that type of an AR.
Yes, yes, it can.
Other questions for Noah on this subject? Okay, John?
Yeah, not necessarily a question, just a concern. And Noah, as you indicated, we're not trying to finance people's utility bills, and I'd hate for us to get into doing that too much. That's really not what we're set up to do. So I just raise that as a concern.
I think historically these have been one-offs where, and our policy's been pretty clear. You had to have been a customer for 12 months. We're going to get rid of that provision, but you're only allowed this once in a year. And I've seen us, and John, I think you've been part of these actions. I know I have, where something was going on over at the naval base that in the budget in Congress, and people were being furloughed and things were going on there, and we've taken action in the past to help people out in those times too. So this is, I think, much bigger than that, and we're just trying to get out in front of it for all of our utilities, because I think that's the right thing to do, whereas the governor's order really only speaks to the water utility. And it would be that would be really difficult for our accounting software to split that out. And secondly, I just don't think that's the right way to go about this. I think their customer at 3 levels: water, sewer, and storm.
Yeah, no, I understand and I agree. And, there are unique circumstances to where I think flexibility is appropriate, but part of it was a hassle for council to have folks come to us and ask for exemptions. But the flip side of that, it was kind of a hassle for them to come to us and ask for an exemption as well. So it wasn't just an easy thing, but certainly during these difficult times, be it a government shutdown or a pandemic or something like that, I think it's perfectly appropriate.
Okay. Other comments or questions for Noah? Okay, so once again, we intend to bring this forward next week. It has retroactive language in it, I believe, doesn't it, Charlie's? Because the governor's order goes back to March.
Correct.
We want to be able to capture that. So our next item, item 4, is the downtown campus and sub-area plan. I know this was a major expenditure that wasn't initially in the biennial budget. We added it to, we talked about it at the retreat. We added it to the budget. And what you guys saw for the finance committee, and we talked about it last week's council meeting, has this in our cash flow projections, continuing this process. But at $200,000, it's a major expenditure. And I just felt that it warranted more conversation to make sure that everybody still feels this is a major priority for us. I still believe it is. When I talked to Councilmember Diener, he felt strongly that way today too. And another twist to this, though, is part of this process is funded by $50,000 from a commerce grant. And that grant has, we're supposed to have it completed by a certain date, and then we get reimbursed. And I've engaged our lobbyist. We've gotten some flexibility in those deliverables. They're going to work with us, but we really have to get most of this work done before that deadline, which is next year. And I'll let Nick speak to those deadlines and where we're at in this, and talk bigger picture on this, and then answer your questions. So with that, Nick.
Yeah, so the deadline on our deliverables right now is April 1st, 2021. So a little less than a year from now. The reason we have an April deadline is the money has to be spent by the end of June in that fiscal year. And Commerce has said they're flexible within the fiscal year so long as the money is spent before the end of the year. I think big picture, we have 2 deliverables. It's a sub-area plan and a planned action EIS. I don't think that those are flexible, but I think the deadlines within the next year in terms of interim deliverables, such as draft documents, those are what are mostly flexible. So we've bought a little bit of time on the back end of this to get the project done, but the finance department approached all the department heads and asked us what projects could be delayed, canceled, or had to go forward. And this was one where we really didn't have an opportunity to delay, and we hadn't spent a whole lot of money. And so if we were going to cancel, we'd be out a little bit of money that wouldn't be reimbursed, but we could turn the grant back. And so the thought was to check in and make sure that you all wanted to proceed with this. And I think the real critical piece of this is that there's a deadline with PSRC to apply for a regional center designation, and they are only opening up that application process once every 5 years. And so the next deadline is 2024. If we didn't do this now, I don't think we would be able to apply until 2029 at the earliest, and we would still have to do this body of work to make an application. So I think the public process on our outreach, we have a draft survey that is ready to go, and we're going to try to get that live, assuming we move forward in the next week or two. And I'm hoping that with people being home, they have time to participate online. But we need to know whether we're going full speed ahead or whether we're essentially putting the brakes on the project altogether.
Sean?
Just a curiosity, remind me, so we were awarded this grant, and then was the grant specific to the exact scope of work in the contract that we approved, or could the scope of work be modified, right? So it still would consider this $50,000 grant, and maybe there's a second scope of work that we could extend a deadline out. It may not be possible, but to almost phase this a little bit. I mean, the $50,000, while great, it only represents 25% of the project. And so could we modify the scope to stay on the grant deadline, still get that body of work done, and then provide some flexibility on the other $150,000 as we, start to see data come in the next few months?
So the House bill that funded this said that you had to do 2 of any 10 tasks on a menu of tasks. So we chose two, which was a sub-area plan and a planned action EIS. Presumably, we could substitute one of those actions with another eligible activity, but I believe we have to complete one of those items. And we might be able to trim a little bit around the edges on some of the tasks, but I think we've already got a pretty bare bones study. If you remember how much this firm initially asked for, we already dialed it back quite a bit on spending, and we're not doing a whole lot of technical engineering reports or scientific type studies. It's really focusing on more general planning and concepts for downtown. So I don't know that we can narrow that scope much more.
Good question. Other questions for Nick? John?
I just have a general comment, not necessarily for Nick. I think this is an important project for the city of Port Orchard, and these aren't the best times, and only time will tell whether or not we can truly afford keeping this thing moving. But as it stands right now, I think we need to keep going with it.
John?
Yeah, the only other concern I'll bring up, and maybe I'm being a devil's advocate a little bit, but I'm curious, and all of us are, we don't have a crystal ball, but what development's going to look like 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now? How is this going to affect what we used to consider mixed use and commercial spaces? And right, so we could go through and design all these concepts on what we knew 6 weeks ago, but it could be totally not relevant to our future. So just to throw that out there, it's a little, we're living some really weird times.
Absolutely correct. Another important piece to this regional designation, it does open us up as a regional center. There's a pot of dollars that we can't compete for that we get access to. So even if the landscape changes, we get our hand in a cookie jar that we've never been able to get into before, over at PSRC. So Jay, and then John.
I'd just like to go back to when we voted for the plan, and Nick, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this was not a plan to sit on the shelf. This was one to move us forward. And while the landscape may change a little bit, the plan the work that's being done will allow whatever activities to come in to take advantage of it. Also, and not to mislead anybody, but we voted on some moving forward on some projects today at Kitsap Transit, and things can't come to a stop just because we don't know what the future may look like. We still have to move forward. And I think that this product that we get will be something that will be moving us forward and allow us to, regardless of the circumstances.
Thank you, Jay. And what Jay was referring to is at Kitsap Transit today, they are pursuing 3 different regional grants. I spoke to one of them last week. One is the Park and Ride study. The second is for a project in downtown Bremerton for a park and ride lot. And the third was a additional study that would dovetail to our study, I hope, for a transit center in our downtown and what that looks like. And transit has a office space need and a need for their marine division. They're outgrowing their current office space, so they're looking at where should they, their marine division logically needs to be somewhere by the water, and we have a need for a better transit facility on our waterfront. So hopefully that grant, it's just applying for a grant, and it's got to go through an entirely separate process that another mayor that I won't mention by name was throwing grenades at this today. So, and it's just, it's the way it's politics. So other question, John, John?
Yeah, I kind of along the same as Jay was just suggesting, and I very much appreciate what Sean was saying. That who knows what our landscape's going to look like here in a few months, but I don't think this is a project that we can just put on hold and sit and wait. Hopefully, it's going to be flexible enough as we go forward that we tweak it as we learn what things may be. But I think it's important, not only from the standpoint that this is a worthwhile project, but as you mentioned, Mayor, this is, excuse me, this is going to open up, once we get the center's designation, an opportunity for bigger and better things. So I still think, even with the uncertainty that we have ahead of us, that it's important that we keep this going.
Beck?
There we go. I just want to echo some of the things that Jay said. I know that when we originally approved this contract and the idea of the sub-area plan, it was very important to me that we have usable deliverables. We already have several plans that are sitting on a shelf, and we do not need to add to that library of plans. So we need some, and I believe that Nick worked very hard with this group to make sure that the deliverable was in fact usable or executable right away. The other thing that I want to say is we have not had an update. I'm sure, I don't know what's happened with the community center and how that is progressing. I know that our contract with that had some time elements in it too. And I saw this sub-area plan as being necessary to continue moving forward with the community center. So I too am supportive of committing the dollars that we have to complete this study.
And speaking to your question about the community center, we were just before the governor's order ready to close the application period and start and narrow it down to the 3 or 4 firms you're going to interview, and the world got turned on its ear. So we never closed the application period. We're closing it the 28th of this month, correct, Nick? So towards the end of this month. We picked a date, we're closing it, and I'm with kind of the plan is we'll spend a week or so after the end of the month to narrow the firms we're going to interview. And so we've notified everybody we're closing this at this date certain, and I'm hopeful things are going to get back. This is that particular, any of these processes, it's important to do those interviews face to face. We can't do it in the format we're doing here today. They're too big of decisions. And so I'm hopeful that in May we'll get back on track with that. The Public Facilities District hasn't met in the last couple of months either. And Noah had a very productive meeting with Bill Mahan and with, oh my goodness, Mike Walton, thank you, as the executive director there. Just as we've moved, we wrote this agreement with them, and now the finance department is like the utility billing thing, dive into it and start, well, what does this truly mean? So we're probably, I know we are, we're going to amend this so that 2 or 3 years from now, there is absolutely no concerns about what this language means here. And they had a very, very agreeable meeting. We just wanted to memorialize that in that document, and as far as how reimbursements are going to happen and so on and so forth. And I've been assured when I reached out to them, the phases that, in particular in the first part of this, they have cash in the bank to pay for it. We're their #1 project, to keep moving forward. Obviously, they are funded by sales tax, by sales tax. And whether that commitment at the end of this, when we're, I'm hopeful we're ready for it, they can still fulfill, but we've got a check-in point for both sides at that point. And nothing else, we'll go through a process, design it, and we might end up getting delayed because the dollars didn't come in the way they planned. And we don't control that today, but we've got, at least 1.5 years worth of work to do before we get to that point.
Rob, have you had a chance to touch base with either the developer or Kitsap Bank just to see if, right? I mean, it's just optically, it's just weird right now to be spending any money on on a center where we're looking to bring people together, right? It's just poor timing. And so maybe just touch base before we get too far. You know, if anyone's kind of uncertain of what the future looks like, let's just make sure that we're not out ahead of something, spending money out of, no matter whose money it is. The money may be there, but it's still.
Yeah,
still
that's a valid point. And as we get closer to bringing contracts forward, and I'm hopeful that, you know, I'll be able to walk into the bank lobby and have a conversation with some of those folks. I mean, I can pick up the phone, but it's those meetings are always, you know, you can read better and people better in person than you can over a phone or this platform.
Right.
So, but good point. Back to the sub area plan. I haven't heard any objection. Like, as I said, the financial plan that we brought forward has this built into it, but really in reality, June is going to be our first glimpse of what our new financial reality is. So we'll be talking more about all of this expenditure and many, many other expenditures and how to move forward on things, you know, over the next few months. So with that, we're to our fifth item, which is a job authority ordinance. And we've got the privilege of Debbie Lund being on Zoom with us this evening. So her and Charlie have been working on an ordinance that they plan to bring forward next week. So Debbie, go ahead.
Good evening. Actually tonight, I believe, and Charlie, correct me if I'm off base here, we're just looking for direction. I think we will wait on final action on this, depending on what the direction is perhaps of the council. So I've been with the city now almost a year, and I've heard conflicting reports and stories about how job descriptions actually get presented to you. So to some degree, this is a little bit of a kind of a fresh start, getting us all on the same page. Without a doubt, only the council has the authority to create a position and to establish the salary for that position, and to really kind of create the big picture of why we would need to create a position or change a position. But the minutia that's in the job description, staff is requesting council to officially delegate that authority to the mayor in the same manner which council has delegated to the mayor the authority to change personnel policy and then report to you. That would be our intent with this as well. That any job description changes that we make, mayor would then report to you. And it just gives the departments the flexibility to make those alterations as new and different ways of doing things come up.
So
I agree here.
Okay. Okay. Seen some thumbs ups there and heads nodding. So, okay. And this, I think it's been our practice off and on. It's just we didn't have any documentation to support our practice. So, so kudos to Debbie and Charlie to putting before, you know, we're going to codify this and bring this forward to next week's council meeting also. To we've got a number from where we're testing for sergeant, and when the new chief came in and looked at the job description, well, those guys don't do that. They do this, and you know, Nick's, you know, looking at his, you know, building inspector position. And so as we go to post jobs, it's an opportunity for us to step back and each time and make sure that those job descriptions are accurate as they should be to the duties that those people are performing. And we'd rather not wait till a council meeting before we post that job. I'd like to get the job posted and then come to you and say, hey, by the way, we another one is that's relevant right now too is procurement, and we're looking at our procurement position because our procurement person has left us, and you know, the job description isn't really what she's been doing here for the last couple of years. Just the duties have changed, so we're just trying to keep things current and relevant. So, Sean?
Yeah, just on this action item here, we've seen this Governor Inslee's proclamation 20-28 statement a few times. And at the beginning of the meeting, council said that she thought that this maybe get pushed back through the May 4th. So if that were to happen, would we have to wait until our first meeting in May because it says the final action would be done after the COVID-19 crisis is over?
I think this would be routine, but what do you think, Charlie?
I think it could be routine. It's largely left up to the agencies to determine what those terms mean. But in this case, personnel matters and non-controversial decisions related to personnel seem to be routine for most agencies in the state. So, and I think it's definitely necessary right now, and potentially even COVID related, because you are looking to increase your public safety personnel and modify public safety personnel job descriptions, so we can make that connection as well.
Perfect.
Okay.
So you'll see it next week. That's what is the short answer. John?
I guess I just was confused. That's where it says the final action will be after the COVID crisis.
Yeah, the wind changes here, but not as often as the governor's office is what
Yes, as far as the governor's proclamation, think of it as a room full of attorneys general cranking these out, making them up as they come. So it changed between the time this was drafted.
Okay, John.
Mayor, I was just going to add that, I concur with Charlie's assessment. I mean, this has pretty much been the practice forever. Council retains the authority to approve the creation of a position and the salary, but the staff works for you. You need the flexibility of figuring out what the staff is going to do every day, and if you need to make tweaks to it. So I just consider this codifying actions that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, Cindy, you raised your hand. You have a question?
After this topic is done, I do.
Okay. All right. And I've got to, unfortunately, you guys have to suffer through a mayor's report too, even though it's a work study. So, okay, we'll bring this forward, and why don't you go ahead with your good of the order, and I've got a few things on a mayor's report here I want to share.
So I should go ahead?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so in trying to plan ahead with my committee, the Festival of Chimes and Lights, this is really a tricky one. It's a community gathering, and I'm not sure if we'll have the funds. So can you give me a little direction about how to proceed?
Well, we're not having any committee meetings really other than routine business until next month.
Right.
Who knows? I mean, my crystal ball. Beck, you have an answer?
No, I have another question. I'm
Okay.
just going to throw mud in the.
You can muddy the waters farther.
I am. That's when does the city, or do we make some decisions about our festivals? Like we have Harbor Fest, or I don't think the Seagull Calling Contest or whatever it is, on Memorial Day weekend, which is the end of May. And I'm sure that those organizers are continuing, with their planning. And are we going to be able to allow that? And I know all of the planning that goes into the parade, the end of June, and the fireworks display on the 4th of July. And my question is, at what point do we make decisions about can they move forward in that? And because they're similar to what Cindy's talking about, we're allowing a large group of citizens to gather, in town. And my concern, even if the governor lifts it or doesn't lift it, will they have time to complete their preparations? I think we have to be mindful of the work the groups are doing to put these events on.
And I've had conversations with a few of them. Last week, the farmers market. So here's what we did with the farmers market, and I think it applies to these festivals, is we're not the ones telling them no, and they have to present us with a plan to conduct their event that complies with the governor's order. And I don't know what those are going to be in a month or two, but right now, the farmers market, they did it through their cars. And this next week, they're intending it to allow people out of their cars, and we're working through a process. We're not telling them what they can do. They're telling us how they're going to hold their event, observe the orders as they stand today, and hopefully they're relaxed more. I think it's safe to say that some people aren't going to be comfortable to attend these events, and their attendance is probably going to suffer. I talked to somebody from the Saints here recently, and they're concerned that their event is funded through sponsorships, and all of their major sponsors their businesses are shut down. And he says, I can't in good conscience go ask for money from these people. So I don't have an answer for you, but I'm a lot, I think we got to give them the latitude to figure that out. I'm not going to be the one to tell them no. But I think everybody's got to use caution in these times. And Sean, you work in this industry, so.
Well, yeah, no, I think you're spot on with what you just said, Rob. But then back to Cindy's question, Cindy, I would challenge you to press forward, and I would challenge you to have contingency plans. I mean, imagine 2 or 3 different scenarios. Just because we couldn't maybe have activities that we've had in the past doesn't mean Chimes and Lights Festival can't continue on. It just may have to continue in a very different way. We could have people coming out in their vehicles per se and driving through downtown and listening to music out of there. I mean, it just might have to be different. And so I think it's all businesses right now and in municipalities where we have to be creative and try to stay ahead of what's going to be the new norm. And I think you're going to see drastic changes in many industries. And so I think, I think we press on, and when we come up with plans that, that would mitigate the concerns that we know today.
See, as much as, okay, that I understand that, but also, do I have to be concerned about my budget?
Well, so in the analysis we performed, we assumed all allocated 2020 budgeted expenses would be spent. So under that premise, I'd say no, because we have already assumed that those funds have been spent.
With that stated, I mean, we did projections based on what we know today.
Right.
It's
It could
evolving.
change.
We're in June, we're going to get our first taste of the new reality,
Right.
and we put pretty dire
I
numbers
saw
in there.
that.
And God, I hope it's not worse, but we don't know till we get the numbers. And I'm hopeful it's much better. I keep reading articles about Amazon's capturing even more market share in the online retail, and online retail comes to the doorstep, and we benefit from that. Kitsap County, different animal. The mall's closed, and so I got hopefully optimistic that it's not going to be as bad. There's no doubt this is in fact really affecting businesses and people though in our community, and people's willingness, even when these restrictions are relaxed, to gather and congregate may be different. And those organizations that are doing these events need to consider that. John?
Yeah, just, cautiously optimistic myself, because when you drive around town and you look at what's closed and what's open, what's closed, generally speaking, doesn't generate a tremendous amount of volume. Things like Lowell's is still open and still selling. You mentioned Amazon is still selling. Grocery stores, for what sales tax comes out of grocery stores, are still selling. Ironically, pot stores are still selling. So
Walmart.
Walmart, yeah. There's a fair amount of the large, now cars, they're doing a lot of things to try to sell cars, but cars aren't moving, and that's a big sales tax item. But some of these others, they're still going. So I don't think, the sales tax receipts are going to be great. I think they're going to be scary, but I don't think they're going to be quite as dire as initially I had anticipated, because like I say, when you go around, for Port Orchard in particular, some of those big sales tax generators are still there. Now, whether they have the volume, I drove out to Lowell's last weekend and the parking lot was full, and the lineup was huge to the point where I turned around and drove away. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's a new world.
I think the big driver and where we had record revenue last year and in the first quarter, and it's primarily related to construction. We need to get our housing market rolling again and the construction activity going again. And if that continues prolonged and we kill the housing market, then all bets are off. I mean, it's gonna change things. Or these downtown plans don't move forward. That's $100 million project and sales tax on that. that's huge. That's going to be, you know, to us in the future. And, you know, I hope to see all that stuff move forward, but my crystal ball isn't any better than anybody else's. So, but good questions. Appreciate you bringing up that topic. It's just a few things. Primarily, my stuff is related to the governor's, AWC held another event with the governor on Sunday morning. And my blood pressure went up, I guess, a little bit after that. What I heard concerned me. And then today's press conference kind of contradicted what we heard Sunday. So I'll share you some quotes that I got from Sunday's remarks. We're at halftime in the first phase and nowhere near ready to enter the second phase. We're near the peak, he said. I can't answer questions on when we will enter the next phase. Statewide significant reductions to new cases. We're at 200 per day. That was on Sunday, where we were at 400 per day, and deaths were down to 15 per day. Eastern Washington is a couple weeks behind Western Washington, and they're having, you know, particularly the larger cities like Yakima and other places in Eastern Washington. They're just starting to see those drastic rises. Social distance is having its desired effects to affect the infection rate. And his statement was, we're looking at months or a year of changed behavior, social distancing and hand sanitation and things of that nature. They felt if they got this next big push of test kits sometime this week, that testing would be available regardless of age and health condition. Anybody that's showing symptoms could get tested sometime starting this week. And he said that it had productive talks with the construction industry, but we need to get the numbers down first. Now, that prompted a call between all the mayors and the county commissioners and us and the Home Builders Association, and the county's already sent a letter. I sent all of you guys. I kept my letter to a single page. The county sent an 8-page letter. I think I'm going to be lucky to get the governor to read my 1-page letter, let alone 8 pages. So I kept it very simple and to the point. Today's press conference, he stated he's ready for a phased approach to construction with proper protections in place, and he's had conversation with the building industry. So I immediately called Russ and I said, do I need my letter? He goes, we haven't heard that. You know, so I don't know. Once again, I don't know which way the wind's blowing. So I think the letter does say, the reason I'm talking about it is the letter is coming from the city, not from the mayor. And I just wanted all you guys to be comfortable with the letter that I drafted before I sent it out tomorrow. And anybody have any concerns or edits you'd like to see in that letter? I emailed it to you yesterday.
Yep, that's good.
Okay, is everybody good with it? Okay. I planned, so our new public informations officer yesterday, I sent him a topic and 4 bullet points, and watch for the press release on Thursday. I just loved it. An hour later, I got this very professional press release that we're going to send out about reopening our parks on Friday. And he quotes me and everything. I was just, I don't know how he read my mind this way, but he did. So the plan is,
you know, Rob, the important part is if he quotes you before you speak, that's really a key
He
point.
did. I mean, I thought these things, and now they're in a quote.
He knows what you meant to say.
So we're going to be consistent with the other cities in the county, except for Bremerton. They're probably going to lag behind us, but the county and the cities, you're welcome to go into your neighborhood park. The parking lots are still going to be closed. The restrooms and the picnic structure are going to be closed. Playground equipment will have caution tape around it, but you can bike and walk the trails and enjoy our park. So we're working hard this week to get the foot tall grass mowed so people can enjoy that park come Friday. So that press release is going to go out Thursday sometime with us opening the parks on Friday. I I talked a little bit last week about Stanley Door and making some improvements to some sewer and water infrastructure. And we found out though that without the improvements to City Hall, that has the computer component that controls everything else. So we can't, until we do City Hall, we can't consider any of the other outlying pieces. And so that being said, we talked to Charlie, and because we've had escalated threats to the police department, we felt this was essential to have better security equipment at City Hall. And the contractor will be in City Hall next week, pulling wire and making starting these security improvements that we put in the budget. So after we get those installed, then I'll bring back and start talking about the sewer and water infrastructure. But the number though, I got excited. That number though of 15,000 only did 2 sites. The Marina Pumps, our 2 biggest sites, the Marina Pump Station and Well 11. But half of it, 7,000 of it, is a one-time cost for a component to the network, and thereafter the smaller sites will be a couple $1,000s a piece. But what I talked to the finance committee about is we've got very critical infrastructure and that lacks proper security, and a couple $1,000s a site from the fines that could happen from ecology to somebody, lawsuit from somebody poisoning our water system or something like that. We can't have, we need much better security than we have. And these aren't, this isn't 1972. So that's all I have. Anybody else have anything else for the good of the order? Directors or Sean? Sean, what do you got?
I just wanted to try to schedule our next Economic Development Committee meeting because we can't see each other very often. So typically we would do it on the first Monday of the second Tuesday of the month. That is not a good day for me. So I'd like to ask the rest of the committee members and staff if the 18th would, Monday, I'm sorry. Would Monday the 18th work for you all of May instead of Monday the 11th?
So that is you, Beck, and Fred on that committee, correct?
Yep.
That works for me.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, it's okay.
Fred,
Okay.
Okay.
So if we could schedule that for, I believe it was 9 a.m.
Okay.
Sound right?
We usually do 9:30, but 9 a.m.
9:30. Is there a preference? I'm flexible.
Yeah, I don't care.
Fred's
Fred,
on
you're
mute.
muted,
He's trying
so-
to talk.
I was gonna say I still like 9:30.
All right, let's keep it at 9:30. That's fine. Thank you, everyone.
That's on a Monday?
That's a Monday,
Okay, I have my
18th of May.
Okay, I just have my standing meeting in Silverdale. Probably we'll be back on by then, so I'll roll in a little bit late. So that 9:30 works better for me.
Great.
John?
I just want to know what was wrong with 1972.
Nothing. It's just we were, as a society, probably safer, and we didn't have to worry about as many things, but they were good times.
So you young whippersnappers have caused problems. Is that it?
Yeah. Beck, you have something to share?
I have a personal issue that I'm seeking some advice for. But since Saturday morning, about 7 o'clock, I've had a little red robin trying to get in my windows. Oh yeah, and I don't know if you guys can hear him, but it makes no difference. He's got about 2 or 3 windows, and he just every 5 minutes he's hitting the window. Okay, I've closed the blinds. I've done a number of things, and he's just like stupid. And I've got a squirrel that sits on the rail and watches it. And I went out there today. He had quit, and I thought, oh my God, he's dead. And so I went out to find the little body on my deck, but there was not a little body, but there was 5 days worth of bird droppings out there. So do you guys have any ideas? Why is this bird doing this? How do I get rid of the bird?
I'm more concerned about you, Beck, than the bird. You need to get out of your house more often.
I think you should open
We
the
need a
window and
welfare
let him
check
in.
on Beck.
Just let him in. Just let him in. Don't.
Okay, but speaking of that, Sean, I'll tell you how desperate I am. You know, I go walking in the woods around McCormick Woods in the back and on the logging trails. And so I was so desperate, I've been taking pictures of scat and showing them to my adventurous people. And apparently it's bear scat. So how many bears do you guys have back there in those woods?
I don't know, but I don't think there's a bird knocking on your window. So no,
All right. I'm
Well,
glad we
Beck, I
could-
would add that at my house, we should get the birds together because I have a woodpecker that wants to peck at my metal gutters at about 4 in the morning. every morning. So if we could get those
Woodpeckers-
two birds together, maybe.
Woodpeckers can get scared away by the balloons that have the great big eyes on them. And Beck, you might want to try a photo or one of those owls that they have of a predator type bird.
Oh, I used to have an inflatable snake, Mark Dorsey.
That works.
But I had an inflatable snake I put on my boat. Yeah.
I think the bird would want to eat the snake. I think the owl is a predator.
Or an eagle or hawk.
Mayor, I think you've lost control of this meeting.
I
So
am- Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Mayor, I had one thing.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yes. Charlie had something she needed to share.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag for council that at your next meeting, there will be a contract that you have not yet seen, and we will try to get that to you far in advance of the meeting so you can digest it. When I came on board, one of the issues with that I see with having your city attorney handle labor issues is it creates some potentially creates animosity between your city attorney and various labor organizations. So I recommended that the city look for a labor attorney to do your collective bargaining negotiating. So we've located an excellent attorney, and we have a contract that we're still working through the negotiations with. Her name is Sophia Maybe, and she lives on Bainbridge, so she will be easily accessible to the city for a negotiating session. So that contract again will be on your agenda for the next meeting, and we'll send it out. I believe we'll have it done as soon as tomorrow, so we'll give you plenty of time to digest and ask questions if there are any. So thanks.
And Sophia is with Summit Law Group, which is a firm that specializes in labor matters. So we're excited to have her on board. So Jay, you raised your hand.
I did, and I don't mean to be a downer on a night when people are in a good mood, and rightfully so. A lot of the crowd I'm hanging with right now is neighborhood crowd, and almost everybody on our street is over 60. And what they're concerned with as we go back to whatever normal is continual of social distancing. Because of until a vaccine is developed, and that's just something that we may need to think about longer term in our city, as Cindy brought up with events and also our meetings, and being in that group. It's been interesting volunteering for some places, physically volunteering to do some work and being basically told, thank you, but you're in the wrong demographics on that. So a little bit of a downer, but it's the long-term approach that probably is going to be impacting us just as well, whether it's downtown. And I know that this state, thank God, is a lot more conscientious than other states. And I appreciate that from the governor down to our commissioners and to our mayor. But just something to think about the long term and not too short term.
Thanks for sharing. Okay, with that, anything else? We're going to adjourn this meeting and be safe, and we'll see you next Tuesday evening. Same place.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.